literally wrote the book on the Meadow Project. Please welcome to the show, Trey Hudson. How's it going today?
Hey, it's doing great. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm just tickled pink to be here, and hopefully we'll get to share this amazing story with your all your listeners.
Well, yeah,
I
Trey,
think
thank you so much for joining us tonight. Like we said a little bit before we started recording, Shane's told me a lot about you. I know a
Mm.
little bit about the work you do, but I'm super excited to get to chat with you and pick your brain a little bit.
Oh, that
So,
sounds
for
painful.
our listeners that might not be aware of your work, would you mind sharing a little bit about the work you do with the Meadow Project?
Yeah. I had an organization called the Anomalous Studies and Observation Groups, and for the sake of brevity, for the rest of the broadcast, we'll just call it ASOG because that sounds cool, doesn't it? But yeah, we'll just call it ASOG. And ASOG has been investigating a specific point of high strangeness located in the America's Southland. And it is so strange and so weird that it's called the Skinwalker Ranch of the South. And that's a bold claim. I get it. But if anybody has been researching Skinwalker Ranch, the man who literally wrote the book on Skinwalker Ranch is a guy by the name of Ryan Skinner. And Ryan Skinner says this place, parallels and in some cases eclipses the famous Skinwalker Range. So it's one of those places that has the whole gambit of high strangeness, everything from UFOs, cryptids, portals, orbs, the whole thing. And we've been researching this since 2016. So it's been 9 years. And some of the stuff that's just been coming out here in 2025 is groundbreaking. We've been working with some pretty well known folks. And, we're just happy to be out there researching and sharing it with everybody through all these various means, be it books, movies, podcasts, radio shows, whatever.
so. I guess for our audience, the whole reason why we originally had you on was we were talking about. Actually, I think it was the Azo One story. We were talking about the Wyoming hunter that got abducted, and there's a few references to these to this like translucent cube type thing that this guy got trapped in. And I know it's not necessarily exactly related because he kind of describes it more as like a box or something, but it
Hmm.
kind of inspired us to kind of dive into some of your work because we think that there might be some possible correlations between the two with these cubes for whatever reason. So I guess a good spot to start for anybody that may not be familiar with some of the anomalous events that happen in the Meadow Project. Why don't you let them know about some of the stuff that you guys encounter when you're dealing with that area?
Yeah, it's interesting you should actually mention the Carl Higdon case, which is,
I'm
what
glad you're
you were.
familiar.
Oh, actually, it's a big part of one of the chapters in my second book because I likewise found correlations in these mysterious cubes or boxes, and as they, coincide with incidents of high strangeness. So yeah, that's very astute of y'all. That's the Carl Higdon case is one of the things that when I you know it happened, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is correlations between the Higdon case. I've discussed it a lot with the well-known researcher Katie Page. She's actually been up to the Higdon site, and one of these days, she and I are going to go back up there and take a look at it. So, and I'm sorry, I completely got my train of thought derailed. What was the question? I apologize.
Oh, we're gonna hop into some of the events that happen
Oh
at your
yeah,
research area that kind of correlate possibly
yeah.
with the Azo One case.
Absolutely. I'm going to start off basically at the beginning, and every good story has a beginning, and hopefully every really good story doesn't have an end. So, but likewise, we'll start at the beginning. In July of 2016, we started looking at this place that we call the Meadow, and I want people to picture a bucolic mountain meadow, just beautiful, about 8 acres. It's really just a beautiful setting. In the mountains, trees, beautiful hardwoods, a small river running adjacent to it. So it's just a beautiful setting. Just to run across, as you're hiking or doing anything. But it turns out that this meadow that we kind of stumbled across had some unique properties. We really started looking in July of 2016, like I said, and reason we liked it is because it was a big wide open area. We could see the sky. We could put teams out with night vision and thermals, and there was a ridge that we could have a listening post, observation post on top looking down. In that particular night, what we decided we were going to do is set up teams in the meadow and with their nods and their thermals, and have a single member move across the top of the ridge, see if he could flush anything down or if he could see anything from his vantage point. This individual is Bob. And Bob is a weird shit magnet. I don't know if I can say that on this
Yeah,
podcast,
you're
but
good.
yeah, but yeah, he is. I mean, it's just, weird crap just sticks to him like ugly on an ape. Uh, so it just so happened that Bob was the one we were going to have walking the top of the ridge. So as we get in our position, Bob says, "Okay, I'm going to start, moving towards the ridge." And he goes, "Oh wait, I left a piece of gear back at base camp because we're all on radio comms. We kind of run our investigations kind of like a military operation. Not that we're militarized, but it's a good template, it's a good model." And so he radios back, says, "I'm going to go back to base camp. Yeah, I'll let you know when I'm back at the when I start back." And so a period of time goes by. Then he comes on the radio and he says, "Hey, everybody, I'm at the tree across the trail. I don't know how I got here." And so, we all have something called a normalcy box. And what a normalcy box is the world that we think is normal. And whenever we are, as human beings, when we encounter something unusual or strange, we quickly jump in that box of normalcy and we close the lids on it and say, everything's okay, everything's normal. So that's what we did with this case. Is like, oh, well, Occam's razor, maybe he's having a medical episode. So our medic got on the radio and said, "Hey, are you dizzy? But do both hands feel like you have strength in both hands? Can you repeat Mary had a little lamb?" Because we're thinking maybe a stroke or a concussion or something. And he passed that with flying colors. So once again, we want to really jump in that normalcy box. And I was like, well, maybe he was just, walking along, focusing on the mission and, just wasn't paying attention. We'd never, we didn't want to consider missing time because that would be too weird. So Bob moves across the top of the ridge and nothing happens. He drops down into the western side of the ridge and starts moving towards one of my teams. Now they can see his white headlamp with their naked eye, and they can also see his heat signature on their thermals. So they definitely know it's Bob. So they brought their thermals down and they're watching this headlamp as it slowly moves across the edge of the meadow. And all of a sudden, where he was, there's this red sphere of light, this orb, this blob of plasma appears, and it jets across the meadow about 100 yards. And we calculated the speed was about 26 miles per hour. Stopped, and they quickly brought their thermals up, and he's standing there. And they get on the radio and they go, "Bob, are you okay? Did you just run?" And he laughed. He said, "No, I'm too old to run. I don't run anywhere anymore." He goes, "Why?" And he says, "Do you feel okay?" They said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why are you asking?" "Well, come over here and talk to us." So he makes his way over there. And the whole time they're watching him through their thermals. And whenever they radio him, they actually see the heat signature on the thermal, bring a walkie-talkie up to its hands, up to its mouth, key it, and respond. So they are seeing the heat signature of Bob. He gets over there and they explain to him, uh, what had happened. Now, these two gentlemen, one of them has dual degrees from Georgia Tech in physics and philosophy, is a former U.S. Army Airborne Ranger, worked with General Motors on some of their artificial intelligence and self-driving products. The other individual has a degree in marketing from Georgia Tech, a master's degree in public administration, and has worked in the public safety sector for many, many years. Both solid guys, okay, not people prone to flights of fancy. And so they explained to Bob what they just saw. And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I just walked over here." They said, "No, you didn't. You turned into a ball of energy and jetted across the meadow." And he's like, "You guys are full of crap. I don't know what you're talking about. I just walked over here." So, that was a point of argument for years until we agreed to disagree and accept the fact that maybe you have quantum effects happening on a macro scale at this location, i.e., you have two realities existing at the same time in the same place, experienced differently by different people. So that's totally unique. And what's really bizarre about that is years later, we put Bob under hypnotic regression. We have a psychotherapist on our staff, and he regressed Bob, and the block on that missing time is so strong that we could never get through it. We could never penetrate that block. Even under hypnosis, he said he has no memory of that period of time between leaving the base camp and reaching the down tree. So that's something that we were never able to explain. Uh, while we were at camp, our base camp operator radioed back and he says, "Hey guys, I've got your uh, I see your headlamps. Why are you returning to base camp by coming over the top of the ridge? That's a pretty rugged terrain." And he radioed back and said, or we radioed back, said, "No, we're still in the meadow. Why do you ask?" He goes, "Because I see green headlamps on the top of the ridge." And he goes, "Wait, those aren't headlamps, and they're about 20 feet in the air." So we had green orbs dancing along the top of the ridge line just outside of base camp. That night at 0200 hours, one of our members had gotten out to take care of some biological business, which always seems to happen when you're warm in your sleeping bag and you know, all tucked in. So he stepped out of his tent to take care of that, and he saw a white hominid figure peeking around a tree. Now, anybody that's familiar with Bigfoot lore, there's the tree peepers, that look at you from around a tree, and went back. And he quickly went to get one of our thermal operators, and as soon as she could get out there with her equipment, the thing had disappeared. What's interesting is this white hominid matches folklore for this area that goes back years and years and years and years and years. So now we have cryptid sightings that match folkloric history of this area. We quite a few of our members are trained trackers. We went back to the site where he saw this. We looked for any compression of vegetation, any disturbed ground litter, anything like that could possibly be tracked back to a source, and we were never able to determine that anything was there. So, but he did see this hominid figure. The next morning is Bob. Remember, weird stuff, Bob, weird shit, Bob. He came to us with his GPS. Now, get a little bit about Bob. He has a very rich history and expertise in backcountry search and rescue. Did it in California, back in the mountains for many, many, many years. That being the case, he always carries a GPS with the breadcrumb and track function turned on, so he can always tell you where he's been. He showed us his GPS track line from the evening before, where he had the missing time, and he turned into the ball of energy. The track line on his GPS showed him being on the other side of the river and moving in long distances via straight lines. The terrain is not of such that you can travel in a straight line on the ground. But how can you travel over the rugged terrain in a straight line?
In the air.
In the air. So we were excited about that. That's a good, solid piece of empirical evidence that's recorded on his GPS. And literally, while we were standing there, the data erased itself.
Wow.
So once again, it's one of those things where people always hear about, electronics failing or being wiped of data, while they're at these areas of high strangeness or are encountering high strangeness. So that's July 2016. Okay, in the paranormal world or the high strangeness world, that's called a grand slam. That's about as good as it gets. But believe it or not, it gets better. So we go back in February of 2017, really intrigued by this place that we're now calling the Meadow. We had put some protocols in place. We tightened up our operational structure a little bit, so we're a little bit more dialed in when we go out, because we've discovered that this place will throw you these curveballs, and you better be prepared to deal with them, because somebody could get hurt or something could happen. So we tightened up our operations a little bit, tightened up our operational template, so we were ready to go back out and experience something really unique. Well, we did the same type of operation as before. We had teams out in the meadow with thermals and night vision surrounding the periphery of the meadow. And this time we had a team of 3 people moving across the top of the ridge, because quite frankly, we came to the conclusion that having one person out there by themselves probably is dumb. It wasn't the smartest thing. So we had 3 people. But we move across the top of the ridge, get over to the west end of the ridge, looking down into the meadow. And Daryl, my senior researcher, is looking through his thermal, and he goes, "That's weird. I've never noticed that before." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "There's a box down in the meadow. It looks like one of those boxes. That's a telecommunications box, like the fiber optics and all of that you see on the side of the road, a telecom box." He goes, it looks like a telecom box down in the meadow. And he goes, I have never noticed that before. How did I miss that all these times we've been out here? And so he hands his thermal back up to me, and I look because we're on a very steep hill, and I'm kind of above him. So I'm looking over his shoulder, and I'm like, Daryl, those are deer. I can see their heads and their four legs. And I hand the thermal back to him, and he's like, wait, that's not what I saw. There was a box down there. Well, once again, our normalcy box, it's like, well, okay, you must have misidentified something or saw a deer, end on, or, he didn't see a box in the meadow because that would make no sense. Yeah, makes no sense. So we dropped down to the west end of the meadow, and about that time, we started getting radio communications from one of our thermal teams all the way on the eastern end of the meadow near the entrance. And they said, hey, we're getting these boxes popping up on thermal, these cubes, and they're only visible on thermal. They're not visible with the naked eye. And we're like, okay, that's kind of strange. What do you think they are? We have no idea, but they're these rectangular boxes or cube things, and they pop up at a site on thermal, and they kind of dissipate, and they pop up somewhere else, and it's like, well, stay put. We're coming over to you. And so people, they were continuing to observe this. We made our way over there to them. And by the time we got there, they had one on thermal that dissipated, was gone. It's like, well, did anybody, was anybody able to record that? And they were having some problems with their thermal, and they were not able to capture that on video. They said, okay, but we know where they were. And we said, okay, let's vector a team to where the boxes were and make sure we're recording this, on your thermal. So we had our thermal operator. She started recording, a lady by the name of Kristen. And as our teams approached the box, they got to the edge of it, where the edge of it was. Now, it was like very faint. You almost couldn't see it at all on thermal. And as soon as they got to the edge of this thing, their heat signatures completely disappear, gone, like they never existed. And a matter of fact, it shocked one of the thermal operators. He goes, did they just disappear? And I'm going to pause right there because we've gone back to during that same time of year, and we've tried to recreate it, and we are not able to recreate it. And if anybody watches the film, The Meadow Project, they'll see that actual video, and they'll see our attempt to recreate it, which there was nothing big enough there to obscure our thermal signatures. And it was also featured in a Discovery Channel show where they actually did an analysis of that video. And the only thing they could come up was inconclusive. And, I'll agree with that. It's inconclusive. We don't see portals every day. So the team came out of it, and their heat signatures started reappearing. Our thermal operator is watching, through her scope, and she turns to the right, and she says, who or what are those? And she sees two heat signatures watching us about 3 feet high, watching us from a small group of trees. Now, something I neglected to tell you is right after Daryl saw the box in the meadow, we recorded a man-sized heat signature, about 6 foot tall, 18 inches wide. Tall, it gets tall, short, tall, short, tall, short, tall, and then splits into two and disappears. So, perhaps we're seeing the same two entities that we had seen before that appeared where the first box was at the western end of the meadow. And so she actually turns and she says, who or what are those? And we checked on our radios, and one of our protocols is once a team is on location, you don't get off location without permission from the tactical commander there in the field, so we don't have people running around helter-skelter. So everybody knows where everybody else is. It was not one of our teams. The crazy thing is 4 people went into the cube, or the area where the cube was. Only 50% of them are still alive. Half of them are dead.
Wow.
So, that's something to throw out there. People are thinking getting into this business without being serious about it. It can be deadly. So that's basically what happened in February 2017. Now, we did have a businesswoman appear at camp in the middle of the forest at 10:30 at night, in the wintertime in an area so remote there's not even a cellular signal, this businesswoman appears wearing loafers, trousers, a blouse, and a blazer. And she wanted us to stop what we were doing as we came back out of the meadow and go with her to chase down these mysterious things that she called monkey bears. Now, I mean, I know what a gummy bear is, but I don't know what a monkey bear is.
Yeah.
She described it as some kind of like weird Bigfoot thing. And in my first book, I call her the mysterious businesswoman of the forest. Now, since then, I've communicated with her, and I still, I'm scratching my head. It turned out that we had a common acquaintance, and I was able to eventually link up with her. And so, in my second book, I've got a whole chapter on updates to the monkey bear lady, as she's known throughout the high strangeness community now. So, it was so weird. She, was trying to, kind of get us to go away with her. She squatted down and urinated in front of us. Just all this bizarre, weird, just crazy stuff. Uh, so that was in 2017. Uh, we've, you know, since then we've gone to other sites in this region. That's equally as strange, where we've seen UFOs. We've got a really nice set of UFOs on video. I've got Mark D'Antonio from MUFON looking into that video, seeing if he can figure out what it is, because I've certainly racked my brain trying to come up with it. We've had strange beams of light, that we see. But one of the really cool things we had is we did an SD session in November of 2019 in the meadow. And this is also in the film, and the transcript is in my first book. If you read the transcript or watch the video, it appears that we are actually in communications with a non-human intelligence using the Estes method. Now, every time I show this video, I tell people, this is the Estes method. This is what it does. I'm going to let you be the judge whether you think we were in contact with something. And almost to a person, at these conferences, everybody raises their hand and says, "Yes, we think you were in communication with something." Where it gets really weird is during the conversation, I start asking about specific phenomenologies, plasma, radiation, uh, all these different phenomenologies, gravitational fields, microsingularities, and the entity gets really upset, really agitated when I start asking about these phenomenologies. So that's one of the things we did, which was quite frankly very compelling and very amazing, was the Estes session. Uh, in January 2020, we had gone back out, and we had a very small crew at that time, not many people, and we had tried a CE5 protocol out in the meadow. And anybody that's familiar with a CE5 protocol is where basically you sit in a group and you project intent out to the universe, saying, hey, UAPs, NHIs, if you're out there, let us know. Come say hi. And so we went out there and we're projecting intent. And let me preface that by saying a lot of our team members are formally trained remote viewers, using the coordinate remote viewing system as developed by the U.S. Army's Intelligence and Security Command and the Stanford Research Institute. So we know a little bit something about projecting intent, and nothing happened. It was a complete goose egg. It's like wah wah wah, nothing. So unknowingly, we were getting ready to have one of those weird curveballs that the meadow sometimes throws you. As we got back to camp, kind of bummed out that nothing happened, go to sleep, wake up Sunday morning, start packing up our gear, getting ready to go. And one of my team members by the name of Tony comes over to me and he goes, "Hey, Trey, I need to tell you about something." Now, let me tell you about Tony. Graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, spent several years in U.S. Air Force Special Operations, is now a much sought after expert in his field of study. He travels all over the world. I'm not going to go into what he does or who he is for security reasons, but he's a highly respectable guy. Has a degree in engineering, really solid dude. And he goes, I woke up, he said, about 4:30 in the morning, wide awake. And he said, I had this word just stuck in my brain that doesn't make any sense. He said the word was Knox Magby, and phonetically spelled, it would be Nox, November Oscar X ray, Magby, Mike Alpha Golf Bravo Echo Echo, Knox Magby. Does that word mean anything to you? And I said, well, no, not really. And he says, well, then at 6:30, I woke up again with that word still there. He goes, it's got to mean something. I said, Tony, it doesn't mean anything to me, but I'll look into it. I'll research it. So went back home, started researching it. Nox was pretty easy. Nox, it turns out, is the Roman goddess of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in Roman mythology, was pretty much stolen or co-opted by the Romans from the Greeks. And the Greeks, she's known as Nyx. And I'm actually going to grab something here. So Nyx and Nox is the goddess of the night. Magby turned out to be a little bit more difficult. And we're going to do a little history lesson. Is you're probably familiar that the Romans occupied Britain for some time. You got Hadrian's Wall up in the north, and you have Roman cities all over Britain, Bath and others. And so I went back and found that word in Old English. Okay, in the poem Beowulf. In Old English was spoken right about the end of the Roman occupation, about I think 400 AD was about the time that the Romans finally left Britain. So it's reasonable that the word Knox and this Old English word are contemporaneous, that the people that spoke Old English would have some knowledge of the Roman system of mythology and god and goddesses. So the word is Magba, and it was found in the poem Beowulf, and Magba means children or kindred. So you put those together, Nox Magba, and it's children of the night goddess. Okay. So looking in high strangeness lore, what do we have that are small like children, that have big heads like children, that come and visit people in their bedrooms at night? I'll give you a hint. Whitley Strieber has a picture of one of them on his book, The Greys. So that was one of those things where the meadow completely threw us a curveball. We asked for contact / confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
We got it, albeit not in a way that we were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to go into this place with an open mind and really be dialed in on what's going on, because it might interact with you in a way that you're not expecting. July 2020 was a hard month for us. On the 18th of July of that year, one of the key members of our team, one of the 4 that went into the cube, died. And we had a trip planned, and obviously he wasn't going to be able to make it. But we decided to soldier on and go anyway in memory of him. It was during COVID, so we would not be able to attend a funeral, and this would be our way of honoring and remembering him. So we had a very, it was kind of like I said, a very tough time. And we went out there, and there were 4 of us that went out to the meadow just to kind of take a look at it, because it really wasn't a research trip. It was really more of a time to mourn, time to laugh, and a time to cry. But we decided, it was too good of an opportunity not to at least go out there. And we found right there at the stream, we found what looked like an oval actually tied in the top of a small sapling on a little tiny island out in the middle of the stream. It was about 12 foot tall, and it looked like the oval of an ankh, the Egyptian symbol, for life, an ankh. It's also interesting that oval or keyhole figure is sometimes called the galactic keyhole. Mm-hmm. And you'll find that in places as a motif where people have historically or mythologically associated with a gateway, doorway, or portal to something else. Now, whatever that something else is, that's a cultural thing. But it's interesting that we found that oval right there in the middle of that stream, only about 50 or 60 yards from where the box or portal first appeared.
Mhm.
But I left out part of the story. January 2020, 6 months earlier, we had gone out to the meadow, very small group. Kristen and I decided to go out and do a baseline survey of all the areas of high strangeness, recording electromagnetic fields, radiation, and any other anomalies that we could find. Part of that is we decided we were going to cross the stream, the small river, to the other side and kind of get an idea of what was on the other side of this since we had the time to do it. So it was January, so we took our boots off, rolled our trousers up, went across the stream. I exited on the other side of the stream and came into another big open field. And I was really excited because, like, here's another big open field just on the other side of this small river that we can do concurrent investigations. So we can have like two groups actually doing concurrent investigations on either side of this river. And I called over to Kristen because she was working her way across in another part. We kind of gotten separated through some reeds and stuff. I said, "Hey, you need to come over here and check this out. This is really, really cool." I said, "It's another big open field." And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "No, it's a big open field. We can do concurrent investigations. I'm really excited about this." And I'm looking around and it's like, well, yeah, this is new. I've never seen this before. And she goes, "Stay put. I'm coming over there to you." And I'm like, "Cool. I can't wait to show it to you." So she gets over there. She comes up out of the water and she goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Isn't this great?" She goes, "Trey, you're right where you started. You never made it to the other side." And this is where it gets really weird. Huh? Yeah, this is where it gets weird. Uh, is it's almost when she said that, it's almost like the environment changed,
Mhm.
and I became so disoriented. They actually wanted to send a medical team out to get me and escort me back to camp. And I said, "Okay, guys," I said, I'm pulling rank here. Leave me the F alone for 10 minutes. Okay, I'm really disoriented. I'm fine. Physically, I'm fine, but I'm really disoriented. Give me 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes, we noticed while we were running our Geiger counters, at that exact moment of the disorientation, we had a radiation spike.
Wow.
And these radiation spikes, if you go and actually do the research at other places of high strangeness, is these little tiny radiation spikes seem to be indicative of incidences of high strangeness, not just at the Meadow, but at Skinwalker Ranch and other places. So, and then fast forwarding back to July of 2020, where I stepped foot out of the river was where the oval was,
Hmm.
a gateway or doorway.
Wow.
So, and that's so I can keep going. Y'all have any questions? I've got tons of this stuff.
I mean, I'd like to jump in for a moment if you don't have
Sure.
anything, Shane.
Oh no, I was gonna say I saw you taking notes over there. I had a few ideas, but I saw you taking notes. I'll let you hop in, man.
All right, so Trey, your story is absolutely fascinating
Yeah.
to me. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. Shane's heard me tell this story many times. I grew up in eastern North Carolina, across the creek from a very large military base. And, growing up, there was always these weird feelings of heaviness. And I never experienced anything even remotely on the level of, what you're talking about, the activity here at the Meadow, but just very strange things in retrospect happened in this area growing up, and just so many similarities to your story I can kind of relate to. About the same time frame, 2021, 2022, both of my parents suddenly died. Um, a lot of strange activity happened after their deaths. My sister was staying on the property for a while, and she was laying in bed one night and called me absolutely freaking out. She said she was just laying in bed and it was like a thought beamed into her head that said, "Go look on top of the refrigerator." And so she got up and went out to the kitchen and looked on the refrigerator. And on top of the refrigerator, she had three like decorative chickens, like people keep in their kitchen.
Right.
And the bodies had been ripped off of these three chickens, and just the legs were on top of the refrigerator. And so, I was trying to talk her off the ledge and said, that's just trickster activity. You're going to find
Mhm.
the bodies of the chickens in the mailbox in a week or whatever. So, anyway, as I got digging into it, I discovered the story, and I believe this is like a Eastern European legend of the Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga in her chicken-legged house. Yeah.
Exactly, in a clearing in the middle of the woods, which
Mhm.
was kind of the situation where we lived in, a clearing in the middle of the woods. And I'm not going to get into details with this just for brevity, but we also had what I would consider a Men in Black encounter when I was a child. So just so many things in your story resonates really deeply with things that I've experienced. And I don't know if I really had a question there as much
Yeah.
as just to say, man, your story is really, really fascinating to me. And I knew a little bit about your research and the Skinwalker Ranch of the Southland, but I
Mhm.
was not anticipating it having this many
No.
correlations to my personal
Oh,
experiences.
and
So,
that there seems to be a template for this stuff.
mhm,
And something that, and I'm just going to kind of go off script here, is something that happened to me, and I talk about this in my second book. Is there seems to be a dogman sort of correlation between extreme high strengthness and the people that experience it.
mhm,
Large canines have been reported at Marley Woods, Skinwalker Ranch,
mm,
and then I had my own experience, like just 40 yards from where I'm sitting right now.
mhm.
Is I had in my backyard canine tracks that measured 6 inches in diameter
Wow.
that appeared to be bipedal, and a track line that started, went a distance, and then disappeared. You go back and you read the follow on to Keller and Knapp's book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, which is
Mhm,
Skinwalkers of the Pentagon. And they talk about one of the original NIDS researchers working for Bigelow, National Institute for Discovery Science, out at Skinwalker Ranch. When he got back home to suburban Virginia, his
mhm.
family started experiencing large upright canines behind their house.
Mhm.
So there's all these weird, kind of occurrences that seem to be a template for people that encounter high strangeness. Now, I don't know if you had any canine
Not
strangeness or
that
not.
I recall, but a lot of this stuff happened when I was very young, and it's just in
Right.
retrospect, as I got more involved in the paranormal and high strangeness, looking back on these things and kind of putting pieces together. So, like I said, I never experienced or saw anything, as crazy as a dog man or anything like that. It was just more kind of feelings and a heaviness and just a general vibe of strangeness around the area, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term.
I want to
Yes.
throw this in too.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had a previous guest at one point, Al Santoriga, if you remember
Mm-hmm.
him, Oren.
Mm-hmm.
He has a spot in New York that seems to be this weird spot of high strangeness too. Maybe not necessarily seeing cubes and everything, but just like a mix of seeing Sasquatch, seeing
Yeah.
reptilian-like beings, seeing dogmen in particular. And he actually had an experience where he doesn't necessarily live super close to this place, but he had an experience where he started having some like dogman activity in his backyard, and it
Yeah.
started
Same with me.
having some activity where it got up to the point where he was coming back up on his porch, and he ended up going outside and basically like yelling that like, this is my place, you don't come here. Started screaming out about it, and he said they hadn't popped back since, but he said it was getting to the point where it was like they're getting closer and closer, and they're up to the point where they're like at his back porch, and he was hearing stuff moving around outside. But yeah, he's got a similar location and had dogmen follow him home too.
Yeah. It's it seems very common. These canines, these large canine creatures, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what the correlation is. You can go back and look at archetypes. You can use there's something called semiotics, which are the way symbols transcend cultures. There's something about the canines. You go
Mm-hmm.
back to Anubis and all of that stuff. Something about the canines that has a link to this high strangeness, and then you can also go into the trickster element,
Mm-hmm.
which, I've had trickster stuff happen, literally just a few feet from where I'm sitting right now. So there's a definite correlation between that. Something that we've had that's very common. This sounds really crazy, but it's so common that it's like when people come out to be guest researchers in the meadow, it's like, oh yeah, you're going to see shadow people and orbs and disembodied. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. So we're kind of like, yeah, that's an orb. Oh, there's a shadow person,
Mhm.
and it's so prevalent that I actually had a film team out several years ago, and we were doing an SD session with the director, and the cinematographer and the production assistant had this like really strange look on their face as we're doing the SD session.
Mhm.
We wrapped it up. Everybody packed up, went back home. The director sent me a message about a week later, and he said the cinematographer and the production assistant refused to go back out there. They're never going to go back out there. And it's like, why, Greg? What happened? And he said, while we were doing the SD session, they saw these shadow figures swirling around me and trying to enter into me. Now his SD session was very visual. He had a lot of visual stuff.
Mhm.
And the cool thing is we actually captured one of the shadow people on film.
Wow.
Is moving behind us.
Mhm.
So that's like just really common is the shadow people. Now, what are the shadow people? I don't know. There's a lot of theories about that particular place. The veil is really thin, and I know that's very cliche. Oh, the veil is very thin, but I think it's one of these places where uh, our reality and other realities can exist simultaneously
Mhm.
in certain geographical locations. And it's kind of like you have in a quantum state that light can be a particle and a wave at the same time. Schrodinger's cat is alive and dead at the same time, right?
Mhm.
So those are quantum effects. But now we're looking at what may be quantum effects on a macro scale. Some of the people that went into the cube said that the environment was different, that it was
Mhm.
cold, it was very dark. They went in unencumbered. There were no brambles or branches or briars or anything. Yet when they came out of it, they encountered this stuff. So it's like there were two realities existing at the same time.
Mhm.
So,
I mean, if you're
but
looking at it that way, to go back to the dog thing that you were mentioning, there's a lot of symbolism with dogs being like defenders of gates in particular. Like they're the ones that will keep things out. So, I mean, if the
yeah,
dogman thing correlates with this, maybe some of their purpose might be that they're supposed to be the defenders. And the reason why they have these instances where they follow people home, but they never seem to get to this point where they're actually attacking, or they never actually get their hands on them if they actually do start seeming like they're aggressive, because maybe the intention is to like scare people away from these portal areas. And kind of correlating into also the shadow people that you referenced, one of the theories that we always suggest as far as shadow people goes is that we might be dealing with multiple things that are all kind of looking like the same thing. We kind of theorize that they might be something that exists in a spectrum that's outside of what we can see in our visible light. So rather than
hmm
them just being not there, our eyes will just basically fill in that gap with complete black darkness. And it might be colors that don't exist in our reality. It might be something that's beyond our capacity to be able to actually understand. But all these different shadow people we experience, they might be a variety of different things, all coming from possibly the same place or from a higher dimension that we can't quite make out. So our eyes basically just flatten them out and just view them as just one flat color.
right, right. Well, are you ready for things to get even stranger?
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
go.
Okay, we have recently, like within the past 2 years, acquired a piece of equipment called a God helmet.
Mhm.
The formal name of it is called a Corin helmet. It
Yep.
was utilized by Michael Persinger, Dr. Michael Persinger, Singer, and Stanley Corin at Laurel University in Canada. And the idea was to stimulate certain parts of the brain with electromagnetic fields
Mhm.
to generate mystic experiences. And Oren's kind of doing the north and south, like he's heard of it or at least have
Mhm.
knowledge of it. We have one. ASOG has a God helmet. And the cool thing about ours is it's completely field deployable. I can basically pack everything up, put it in a backpack, and go anywhere on Earth and set this thing up and put somebody under.
Mhm.
So we started doing experiments with it. When we were filming the Meadow project, in about a year ago, November of last year, we filmed one of our team members going through a God helmet session. Now, unfortunately, this did not make it into the main, excuse me, make it into the main film. It is in a add-on documentary called The Helm and Lens,
Mhm.
which is a bonus thing if you purchase the film. But so there's a little documentary about the God helmet session
Mhm.
that's adjacent to the main film. But so they filmed one of our team members going through it, and during his session, he had very vivid visions of beings all around him. You know, he said it felt like there were people around me, and then I had, you know, visions of people, you know, beings, entities standing around me, and then I had visions of a long hallway with a cube at the end of it,
Hmm.
and all these vivid imagery. Well, we took that one step further. What we did is we took the video with no sound
Mhm.
and we sent it to Stephen Leah, who is the owner of Hidden Worlds Quantum Imagery. And you may have seen him on Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch. He does a quantum image analysis for that. So he agreed to work with us on this project. And so he took the several still shots of the video, not knowing, you know, what Sean experienced or anything, just a picture of him sitting there with the God helmet apparatus on, the blindfold and the earplugs. And he started pulling quantum data out of these images. And as he's going through his just proprietary process, you know, we're emailing back and forth, and the film director's, you know, part of this conversation. He's like, "So you sent me this video of this guy sitting there having his brain monitored." He goes, "But something's going on with the left hand side of his head. It's like there's something going into the left side of his head."
Hmm.
And it's like, Stephen, we were actually electromagnetically stimulating his left amygdala. And he says, "Whoa, you're not just monitoring his brain, you're actually doing something to this poor guy? Does he know what you're doing?" And it's like, "Yes, he volunteered. He's fine. You know, I talked to him last week." And he goes, and then he goes, "There's this like toroidal shape, you know, in the middle of his head, like energy is fluxing through his head." And then he says, out to his right side, which it so happens is over his right shoulder, is the trail that led to the meadow.
Hmm.
He said, he goes, "I'm picking up these boxes, like, you know, these images of boxes with faces in them."
Hmm.
He goes, "Does that mean anything?" And it's like, "Stephen, yeah, that's where the meadow is. That's where the box and cube is. You know, that's where the shadow people are." So using that analysis and some other stuff that we've worked with him on, what we have discovered is not only the cube is not transient, it's always there.
Hmm.
It's just not there where we can perceive it. It's there in a
Mhm.
quantum state. And even more disturbing, and this took me several days to process because I actually saw this, the evidence of this, is there are these beings around us at all times.
Mhm.
Not only are we not alone, we are never alone.
Hmm.
And they're always there, always watching, always somehow in the background, potentially affecting things around us that we don't know about. And that is the thing that I found most amazing is when Steven started doing this analysis for us, he basically started hitting on boxes and cubes and,
Mhm.
you know, entities and all that, and it validated the past 9 years of our research.
Wow.
And that's the most exciting thing that's come out of 2025 is a validation of all of these things.
So I know this is an unanswerable question I'm about to ask, but do you think the cubes are some type of portal? Like, in your
Yeah.
estimation, what do you think these cubes represent?
You know, I don't know if they're an avatar of something
Mhm.
else. You know, it could be that they are actually an avatar or a three-dimensional representation of a multidimensional object. That's just the way it presents in our dimension.
Mhm.
I think that the cubes seem to be somehow correlated with transitional experiences, you know, and
Mhm.
that's a loaded term, but that's people going into another reality. like Carl Higdon in Wyoming being taken somewhere else. Some of the stuff that's come out of the recent UAP hearings in Congress. You have Navy pilots talking about seeing a cube inside of a sphere. The cube goes all the way back to a very ancient structure, a very ancient symbol. The cube is talked about in the Bible. You know, the Sanctum Sanctorum in Solomon's temple, where the ark is actually kept, is a big cube-shaped room of perfect dimensions. In Mecca, you have the Kaaba, which is a giant black cube. Which
I was going to
actually,
ask you about that, the whole like Saturn black cube worship idea.
Yeah, that's another chapter in my second book, is all about cubes. And, you know, and I talk about the Kaaba was actually worshipped and revered by people pre-Islam. You know,
it's Jewish mysticism, correct?
Well, it's no, it's actually it's polytheistic. Is the people there in the area of Mecca before Islam worship many deities.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is, in the Kaaba, you know what's in the corner of the Kaaba? A mysterious space rock, a meteorite that fell from the sky in prehistory, that is revered by Muslims when they take the Hajj, or the pilgrimage, that they try to get up to it and touch it. And even to this day, that, you know, that rock is somehow considered very special in their culture and their religion. So we move forward into the New Testament. In the book of Revelation, when John the Revelator talks about Jerusalem coming back to earth, how does he describe it? As a perfect cube, translucent, 1,400 miles per side. Once again, the cube motif. The alchemists, when they were describing something called the prima materia, which is the basic building block of all matter, it's represented in alchemy and sacred geometry as a black cube. Carl Jung, for some strange reason, on the shoreline of his cottage, he erected a black cube. One of the second member of our team that passed away, that went into our cube, his ashes are scattered at the meadow. Do you know what his urn was?
A black cube.
A black cube.
Wow.
See, we got into this whole idea a very long time ago. I think it was like right when Orrin first originally came on the show. We got into this whole idea about this like cube dimension theory. And it's kind of like a hard thing to fathom, but essentially we're kind of throwing this suggestion that the way that reality functions is that it's basically just all these cubes that are stacked on top of each other. And there's these certain points where it's almost like center access points where you can basically shift into like different areas of the cube. But the other thing that I was kind of thinking about when you're explaining this is this whole idea that we've talked about a few times about like pocket dimensions, but another kind of extended version of that. Like, what if these like pocket dimensions aren't necessarily pockets, but like from our representation, we kind of view them like it's a cube inside of our reality. But if you enter that, there might be a cube that enters back into our reality. Like, it's almost like this continuous idea about the only way to enter back through into these cube realities is through cubes. Like, it's like the main building block to get to different locations. But yeah, I don't know. There's something very particular with cubes, and it seems to be with like portals for whatever reason.
And the weird thing about cubes is you show somebody like an image of a cube, it really resonates, but people can't tell you why. They look at it, it's like it's very special, but I don't know why it resonates with me. And it's one of those Jungian archetypes that there's a genetic memory that we hold cubes or boxes to be sacred. And I think you're hitting on it. I think that's why in the movie Interstellar, you know, when he goes into the multi-dimension, you know, starts talking, experiencing the multi-dimensions, it's almost like he's in a lattice work. And a cube is nothing more than a part of a lattice work. Cubes inside of cubes inside of cubes. And then you start talking about some of the most unique and amazing structures, crystalline structures here on Earth, piezoelectric and quartz and all of that, are lattices. So all of this is important. All of this is very special. Now, how it all fits together, I'm not sure. But I think you're onto something. Absolutely. I think that's definitely a way to look at it.
I mean, especially if you're considering it from that viewpoint, that we're looking at the cube in our reality like it's a cube, but if you go up a dimension, you're not necessarily representing it as a cube itself. It's
No.
almost like maybe we're at like the bottom and we're looking into it. And if you look at it more maybe as like a doorway or a hallway that's stretching up, maybe that's kind of how the access point works. Like there's portals that might go parallel to realities, and then there might be these cubes that go up reality, so to speak, because it seems like dimensions seem to move up and across. So maybe that's kind of where the representation, the difference comes in between the circles and the cubes, is a matter of going up or going sideways.
Yeah, and that's very, very astute, because when we draw a cube, we draw a box and then a box, and then we draw all the corners together. And that's actually a two-dimensional shadow of a three-dimensional object, i.e. a cube. Okay, then you have something called a tesseract or hypercube, which is a cube inside of a cube with all the corners connected, but one dimension up in the fourth dimension, all those angles are right angles. Now, we can't conceive that because we're unfortunately trapped in this three-dimensional Euclidean world that quite frankly, I think we've created in our own mind, because human beings are multidimensional entities. We can interact in multiple dimensions. That's why we do remote viewing and telekinesis and stuff like that. So, talking about the cube as we interact with it in places of high strangeness being a lesser dimensional representation of a multidimensional object. But where it gets really funky is just take the idea of objects and just throw that out the window. It's the three-dimensional representation of a multidimensional something. There may not be any delineation between object and intelligence in these other dimensions. They might be one and the same or nothing at all. So when you really start looking at it like that, it gets really, really funky. And then you get into the theory, this is one of my theories, that, UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids, high strangeness are all facets of the same diamond. And the way they present into our world is just that one element of their nature is reflected down into our dimension. So one time whatever this is, this otherness might appear as a Bigfoot, or another aspect of it might appear as a UFO, or might be a ghost, and it might be all parts of a much larger entity, object, or otherness that we can't comprehend or understand.
Yeah, that's an idea we talk about on the show all the time, about the phenomenon, or the others, as Shane likes to call them.
We always call them the others. That's like our terminology. We call them
wearing these different masks and presenting itself in largely the way that the experiencer might expect it to present itself. If you're in the middle of the woods, it'll present itself as a Bigfoot. If you're out in the desert, it might present itself as a UFO. So, I mean, I think what you're getting at, I mean, I agree with wholeheartedly. I absolutely think aliens and UFOs exist, but as I like to say on the show all the time, more than one thing can be true at the same time. And I think there's obviously a very strange element to all this that goes beyond flesh and blood extraterrestrials in nuts and bolts spaceships.
Yeah, when I lecture, and it kind of going on what you say, is when I lecture, I have a cardboard disc. Okay. And one side of the disc is red, one side of the disc is blue. And at one point of the lecture is I kind of step out into the audience and I tell them I have it in a file folder. I say, I'm going to hold this up. And on the count of three, I want you to tell me what color you see. And I hold it up and half of the room yells red and half of the room yells blue. I go back up to the podium. I say, you know what? 100% of you are right. And 100% of you are wrong, because it's duality. And from your perspective, you perceived your reality and only your reality. And you had no knowledge of the other reality, but it was just as real as yours. And then I'll take the disc and turn it 180 degrees so they can see what I'm talking about. And they're like, oh, you fooled us. And I'm like, think about it. Your truth with a lowercase t is not necessarily truth with an uppercase T.
Well, and that's something as simple as, a piece of cardboard you're holding up. When we're talking about, these huge esoteric,
Yeah.
existential ideas, like how many times greater is, that experience amplified in, things like
Right.
that are going on at the meadow.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people is, when you come out to the meadow, especially when I have guest researchers, is whatever you're expecting, just leave that at home, because it may throw you a curveball, something that you absolutely are not expecting. And I am not going to give away the film, okay, because it has a twist at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is one of those meadow curveballs that, in a very unexpected way, the other says, "I'm still here and I'm watching."
Well, I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I also wanted to throw in this other idea. This was something that I was thinking about the other day, but I think it kind of correlates with a little bit of what we're talking about with these things that are existing in different realities and having different perspectives of the same thing. But we try to correlate these things and try to put them into ways that are fathomable for people. But when you try to break them down, they may not necessarily make sense if you don't have the right perspective. But you know, getting into something a little bit more biblical, when you talk about the Bible, you talk about the Holy Trinity. You got, the
Right.
Holy Spirit, you got Jesus, and then you have the Father. So if you're looking at that possibly from an interdimensional perspective, you might be able to kind of visualize it like this, that there's the version that exists in the physical world, which would represent Jesus. There'd be this version that is represented in the ethereal world, which would be the Father. And then there's this version that is everywhere all at once. They kind of
Right.
exist in multiple places all at once. So it's kind of a hard idea to try to break down and fathom. But if you look at it from that perspective, maybe it might be a representation on a lot of these other things that we deal with, that, there's this physical representation of them that we're seeing. There's also this ethereal representation of them. And then that's existing wherever they came from. And then there's also this, for lack of a better term, like this spiritual representation of them, which seems to be this, like the woo-woo side of some of these
Right.
experiences. Like, I think if you look into some of these old books, they're trying to describe some of these things that completely make sense, but you have to look at them from a different lens. And I
Yeah.
think that whole idea about, I know everybody has different interpretations of it, but the Holy Trinity might also correlate with this whole idea about how we interact with things that are coming from these higher realities or these other dimensions.
Well, that's a very good point. Is that's something that a lot of Christians really struggle with, is the Trinity. So it's God, the Father, and the Spirit all at once. Three in one. And I tell people, I'm a father, I'm a son, and I'm a brother all the time. But I'm a brother to my sister, I'm a father to my daughters, and I'm a son to my father all the time. And that's, when you start kind of looking at the not only the duality of nature, but when you start getting into the multiples of it, the tritality and et cetera, is it really kind of opens your mind. And it's, you can take that in two ways. You can be kind of scared by it. No, I don't understand it, it's scary. Or you can take comfort in that there are things that I don't understand, but it's all going to be okay. Because in the Bible, it talks about I am the Alpha and I am the Omega, which is, in my opinion, a quantum statement of saying everything that ever was, is, or will be exists now, currently in a quantum state. And what we do is, when we go to these places of high strangeness, we take our finger and we dip it into the quantum pool and we stir it around a little bit and we see a tiny little ripple, because we don't want to wave. We probably wouldn't survive that. And we get a little taste. And I take comfort in that, because this meat machine that I'm driving right now isn't all that there is. There's much, much more. And it's probably going to be a lot cooler than sitting in this room talking to y'all. No, don't take that the wrong way. But, the whatever's on the other side, I think, is going to be amazing.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. I think we've trapped ourselves in this reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think that there also has been some working hands that have kind of pushed us into that corner. But I think that if we look at a lot of these things with this kind of zoned out perspective, I think we'd have a lot more understanding of them, because a lot of people will kind of just nail down on one specific thing and be stuck in that. But a lot of the time, you just have to have that outside perspective and view on things. And then a lot of this other stuff might actually correlate along with it and
Yeah.
actually make more sense when you have a broader perspective on
Yeah.
things.
Absolutely.
But I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end. We'll definitely
Yeah.
have to do a round two, because I'm sure that there's still a lot of crazy
Oh.
stuff that's happening at the Meadow, and you guys are always continuing on with this research. So
Yeah.
yeah, at some point we'll have to definitely come back for a round two and keep diving into this high strangeness stuff, because
Oh,
we'd
yeah.
even love to dive in some more with some of these theories and stuff with you, because we had to lay down the
Oh.
groundwork a bit, but I think there's a
Ooh.
lot to explore as far as these theories go too.
Well, like my wife says, don't get me started. I'll just, I don't. Sometimes I don't have an off button when I get all esoteric on this stuff. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and we'll get together. I'll pour me a bourbon so I get kind of all energized and everything, and we'll give it a go.
Well, you can get just as esoteric as you want with us.
That's
so,
right.
But Mr. Trey, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I was expecting to be, very interested in your work. I was not expecting to be blown away to the level that I was. So thank you so much for sharing. This has meant a lot to me, and I hope we get to chat with you again at some point.
Thank you for the kind words, Warren. Both of y'all. Thank you for having me. I mean, like I tell people, this amazing experience. It's not my story. It's not the story of my team. It's the world story.
Mm-hmm.
It deserves to be heard, and it deserves to be told.
Well said.
And if anybody wanted to come and check out that story, read some of these books to check out some more experiences, check out the documentary, even just keep track of your work, where can people come and find all of your work across the internet? Where can they get the books, and where can they keep tabs on you?
Probably the best way to do that is to just go to your local post office and look at the wanted posters. That's how you keep tabs. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I kind of went crazy once I left government service. No, is probably the best way is to go to my website, which is www.treyhudsonresearch.com. On there, you'll find links to the film. You'll find the trailer to the film, the links on how to watch the film, and you'll also go to the section that says books. And then I have links to both of my books, which are both on Amazon. Or you can go to Amazon, just type in Trey Hudson, the Meadow Project, and it pops up. Also, I'm on Facebook, Trey Hudson author, and I go on there and make pithy, smart comments sometimes, but mostly it's just a bunch of silliness. But that's where I'm at usually.
Well, I'll make sure I include all those links down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And as Orange said, we really appreciate you making the time to come on. It was a really, really fascinating conversation. Definitely connected in with a lot of stuff that we've been researching. So that always is a good sign that we seem to all, as a group, be onto the right path. And we're really looking forward to chatting with you next time.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Can't wait.
Have a great night, mister.